This video is sponsored by PCBWay. More on them in a minute.
This is the new IFixIt soldering station, and this is the entire kit. For a whopping $300, you can solder on the go with this battery-powered precision soldering kit recently released by IFixIt. At the time of writing, you have to pre-order off their site for a January shipment. But stick around, I'll tell you where I got mine without any pre-order whatsoever. In fact, this was an impulse buy. To test this out, I got two Learn to Solder kits off Amazon that I thought my kids might get a kick out of. I'm a solid amateur at best, but most of my experience is on the big stuff I don't need precision for. I fixed connections on a Honda Magna I was rebuilding, rewired a little Eaton Viper Jr. I restored for my son, and some basic Raspberry Pi soldering. I dipped my toes in precision soldering by modding this GameCube, an original Xbox, and soon to repair this DOA Game Boy Advance. So when you first open the box, everything is rolled up into a convenient little, roll. Unravel it, and the star of the show is this big old battery. We have two front ports that can output a total of 100 watts combined, meaning you can actually have two soldering irons on this one battery at the same time. Might be useful if you need two very different tips for the same job, and they're both easily accessible. With half the power, they may take a little more time to warm up, but maintaining temperature shouldn't be an issue. Unfortunately, I don't have two to test that, but we have a button and dial on the front, presumably for power and adjusting temperature, but we'll turn it on in a bit. It has a little kickstand, and the port in the back is for charging at up to 45 watts, and you can even connect it to your PC to update the firmware. It also came with a plastic precision screwdriver with a Torx and Phillips bit because they seem mandated to use security Torx screws, but that isn't what iFixit is about. So they ask you to cross your fingers as you pinky promise you won't change those Torx screws into the provided Phillips screws. The soldering iron connects through the front USB ports and has a twist lock connection on the iron itself. We have an on-off switch at the top, a magnetic cap, and it comes with a 1.5 bevel tip. You can buy additional tips like a point or a knife tip at $20 each since they are proprietary. Like I said, you can connect two of these if it's useful to you. Other tools included, we have lockable wire strippers that go from 10 to 30 gauge. We also have lockable flush cutters and small tweezers, which are amazing to have, especially if you've ever tried a project without them. We have some consumables, no clean flux and lead-free solder, which I guess you could find replacements that fit in this roll, but I'm not going to bother. I had no idea this was electrical tape since I'm used to seeing one of these two types of tape. Safety glasses, desoldering braid to clear PCB holes, or if you're like me, fix your mistakes, a spudger, a soldering splint to hold two wires, a tip cleaner you're going to use before you turn off the pen each time, a silicone work mat to protect your desk, and finally a chemical pen. This one took me a minute to figure out, and the example iFixit has is to fill this with isopropyl alcohol since the tips are replaceable. Honestly, I'm not going to use it. I'm good with Q-tips, but you can put anything in it, I suppose. All this comes with your standard 1-year warranty. They advertise it takes 5 seconds to heat the soldering iron, and okay, I'm sold. That was just about 5 seconds to heat to 750 degrees Fahrenheit, which is on the high end of what we should be using for lead-free solder. They also advertise 8 hours of uninterrupted soldering, which we're gonna start to test that. I'm not about to solder for 8 hours straight. I'm sorry, I have other things to do. But at the end, we'll see just how much battery we use after these two small projects. We turn this thing on by pressing and holding the button on the front. We plug in our iron, rotate the dial to choose our temperature, and as we saw, 5 seconds later, you're, doing something. I'm told if you have your own battery pack, you can use the soldering iron on its own, but you need to configure it with your computer. The advantage of their whole kit is you can use the battery to set the temperature instead, so we're gonna do that. Programming it with the computer sounds incredibly inconvenient.
Before we start, now's a good time to tell you about PCBWay. If you need custom PCBs, CNC machining, or 3D printing, then PCBWay can help you out. They can take any size project, even small projects, and turn your ideas into something that can be shipped to your door. Check them out with a link in the description below.
Let's get started with our soldering kits. First, I'm going to only use the iFixIt supplied materials unless we run out, of course. Spoiler, I did end up switching to my own flux, but we'll talk about that as we work on our projects. This Ryobi kit I had wasn't a precision set, so I was very excited to do this. The first kit I bought was an LED Christmas tree that I thought my son would like, and the second kit is a heart with LEDs around the edge that my daughter would love. The Christmas tree is 2 PCBs slotted perpendicular to each other on a PCB base. It's powered by 3 AA batteries with an on-off switch. It'll flash its LED lights on the edges, and it looks like I have a few that are out, but we'll keep that to ourselves. Towards the inside of the PCB, we have various components we'll be soldering, like resistors and capacitors. The instructions for this specific kit is awful, and the reviews seem to agree, but a little experience filled in the gaps, and if you're brand new, maybe look for reviews on a kit that praise the instructions instead. While using my soldering kit, I wasn't sure if I should be turning the iron on and off every time I had to put it down. The cap you use to store it on the side seems like it can take the heat, and a few times I forgot to turn it off without damaging anything. What wasn't pleasant, and why I turned it off every time I was done using it, was because you touch the cap to help you pull the iron out of its magnetic home, and you'll burn yourself. I only made the mistake of touching this once, and do not intend on making that again. I don't know if it's designed to be left on, but I won't be doing that, and the process of off and then on again got annoying, unlike a bigger soldering station. While I'm dedicated to use the included consumables, I definitely prefer my own soldering flux. The solder worked fine, no complaints there, but I prefer my 0.5mm solder since it's easy to control. The IFixIt flux is no doubt high quality, but it's more of a goop and left a lot of residue, which was pretty hard to clean up. In fact, I stopped trying after a while. I could have used less, but the control you have to get it out of this tiny tube made that incredibly difficult. The flux I like to use has the consistency of water and can be dispensed at a drop at a time. This is personal preference, and I suspect after using this stuff, you'll go back to whatever you prefer as well. For my daughter, I got this heart I'll be soldering. Just like the tree, this is a kit for you to learn how to solder with, and also has capacitors, resistors, LEDs around the edge. This time you have a resistor for every LED and a chip in the middle. On the back, you'll find a surface mount PCB for power delivery, which the tree had no surface mount parts. I actually like this one more since there's a lot more going on visually, since each LED gets its own resistor, the LEDs do more patterns, and it's just visually intriguing. When it comes to soldering, it's more of the same, except I didn't burn myself as much. I actually did switch to my own flux at this point. I really did not like the provided flux, but again, that's personal opinion. All the LEDs are lit up after reflowing the battery wires, and well, there it is. I like the clear case it has, the big chip in the middle. I spent about 2.5 hours soldering and ended up with 70% battery remaining, which 2.5 divided by 0.3 is 8 1/3. So they didn't lie about the 8 hours of soldering, and I'm pretty impressed. Maybe not uninterrupted soldering though. I was also happy that it really did take 5 seconds to go from 100 degrees up to 750 degrees Fahrenheit. It's also really nice that the whole roll of tools, including the station, is the same size, maybe even less than my old station. Is it worth $300? Well, maybe not. I'm happy with what I got, but I probably should have gotten a nice $300 desktop soldering station and then an inexpensive portable soldering iron pen, because 90% of the time I'll be at my workbench. With a desktop station, the tips aren't proprietary. I would expect the internals to be higher quality, although I don't have the expertise to test that. Regardless, I have the IFixIt kit now, and I want to keep it. And this would have made the precision soldering I've done 100 times easier. Like I said, I've done the PicoBoot GameCube, Project Stellar Xbox, and I'm about to tackle that Game Boy Advance. I had to constantly clean up the bridging with a non-precision kit I had, especially for that Xbox. The Ryobi is going to earn a spot in the garage where it can be used for motorcycles, ATVs, and dirt bikes on my other channel. I'll be picking up a few tips to use for the IFixIt kit, but as for the future, I would really love to see a USB powered set of tweezers or even some sort of desoldering tool. Despite being portable in nature, it'll be on my workbench and in future videos, just like when I reviewed the Bamboo Labs P1S.